I'll tell you this, but you have to promise not to freak out.
Okay.
And also
I
you have
won't.
to still be my friend. Okay.
Of course. Of course.
Oh, I just don't think secular people should celebrate Christmas.
Why not?
Well, do you participate in Ramadan?
No, I don't.
Why is that?
But I respect it. Mainly because it's just not a part of, like, I would say if I get to the root of it, I just wasn't brought up with it, and so it's not a common thing. Although I have seen different videos of people, and it does seem really cool, but I also kind of feel because I'm white, it would be a little, I don't know. And it's not my culture necessarily. So I would feel if someone invited me into it, I would obviously respect that and really enjoy the experience. But I
But
would
that's
feel
like
wrong taking it on.
anthropologically, like enjoying the experience, right? It's not, you wouldn't feel about it the same way you would about Christmas, because you're like you were brought up with Christmas, as you said, like it's part of your culture, it's part of like all your memories as a child and stuff like that. But let me ask you this. So you were also brought up with the patriarchy, and like, but you say, yeah, this is kind of like something that has been socially existed in my culture, but I reject that, like I think that's crap.
Well, I don't know. I disagree because I also feel like I can't speak for all Americans, right?
Sure.
For me, Christmas has always been a sort of like, we've had specific traditions around Christmas that we do that are kind of like, so like, and they're obviously pretty mainstream. Like we decorate, we hand make and decorate the cookies, we pass them out, we make like Rice Krispie treats, all the snacks and stuff. We make ornaments, we decorate the tree, we have a miniature village that we set up and like things like that. You know what I mean? We decorate and we share. So we have certain traditions specifically around the Christmas holiday where we open gifts, like we open one gift before, and like, in retrospect, it does seem kind of like different, but I don't associate those to a negative experience. Like those don't take something from me, whereas patriarchy would limit me. I can add on to as many Christmas traditions that I want because in my family right now, we have a matriarch. You know what I mean? The head of our household is my grandmother. And so it's,
I'm gonna,
I feel like it's different.
Okay, I understand that. So when I talk about Christmas with people, there's like two things that come up. I say Christmas is a Christian holiday, and if you're secular, then under what I understand secularism to be, you shouldn't, and the reason why you do it's because like it's fun and it's part of your culture and all that thing, but it's like religious influence in your culture that you're participating in, and you're just tolerating it because well, I'll go into it later. And then people go, well, you should know that Christmas is actually a secular holiday. And then they also go, well, Christmas is, it's, the issue is more that it's like commercialized, and like they give like the capitalist take of like that it's about selling stuff and buying presents. And I just, okay. Do you have anything to say about what I said before we go into it?
Yeah, I'm kind of, okay. So the thing that I think I'm kind of getting stuck on is why do you like, do you think someone who's atheist who identifies as Satanist, right? Do you think they shouldn't be allowed to participate in Christmas traditions? Because a lot of the Christmas traditions I mentioned, while yes, they are influenced, most people don't recognize that. Like the Christmas tree is influenced by Germanic and Norse, traditions. Like it didn't necessarily start there, but that is something that, and think like with.
Yes, I agree with you, but you're not celebrating those. You're celebrating Christmas. See, I wouldn't have a problem if you wanted to celebrate Yule and you brought a Christmas tree in, but you're celebrating Christmas. So just because like Christianity came around to certain parts of Europe and they were like, How do we sell Christianity to these people? We just call this Christmas and we use their traditions. Okay, I'm sorry. I got a bit bitter.
No, I get you.
I'm going to tell you, I'm first of all, I'm not talking about be allowed, right? I'm talking personally from my perspective. So, and I'm going to like be very like upfront from the get-go, and I'm going to tell you what perspective I'm looking at this from. Usually when I come to this and I divulge it to people, it doesn't seem to like influence the discussion at all, which I find annoying. But I trust you, so we'll see how it goes. So I was born and raised in Israel, right? Mm-hmm. So technically, most people would consider me Jewish. Okay. Why are you quiet?
I'm listening.
Okay.
I'm wondering, like, okay, so if someone, people consider, like, because you're born and raised in Israel, people consider you Jewish.
Oh, no. What I mean is like whether I identify as, whether I introduce myself as Jewish or not, I found that it's not an escapable, like I can say, look, I have no affinity to the Jewish religion. I don't consider myself part of the Jewish people because I don't think Jewish people exist outside of the religion of Judaism. But people find that really odd. So they'll just be like, there's no escape. I can't be like, I'm an atheist. They think I'm ethnically Jewish. So I'm just like cutting corners on that. And I'm just like, let's say that I'm Jewish. Okay. Even though I don't personally see myself that way, other people see me that way. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And Israel as a country is very complex, but there's a lot of religious influences. A lot. There mm-hmm. isn't even a separation of like a church and state, except that we have a synagogue, right? Instead of the church. And it goes really deep, but the concept is that I've grown up in a certain society since I was brought up with like secular parents that are also atheists, but they do consider themselves ethnically Jewish. I was brought up with this certain like way of looking at things where we see religious influences entering the secular life that we want to lead. And we're very resentful of it because the country and the culture and most people here are fine with that. And they're permitting that and they think that's okay, you know? How can you be truly Jewish if you don't wear a yarmulke? I mean, everybody does, except that you have to believe in God for that to make any sense. And what if you're an atheist? There's like a lot of complexity that goes into it. But basically, as I grew up, I'm very sensitive to noticing religious influences, and for Jewish people, for Christian people, for wherever I like start knowing the culture and shit. And the reason why I see it as a negative is because most people are unaware of it. So when I have the Christmas debate with people, I always say, look, if we talk about Christmas and you want to say, I get your point, Katie, that you see Christmas as a religious holiday. I see your point. I kind of disagree. I see there are religious influences here. I see this point and that point and that point, and I accept all of that. And I still want to engage in this behavior. Then I'm like, oh, fucking go ahead. But my issue is that I see the lack of awareness, and the thing I come like to heads with people is that they seem to be fine to be blinded to these certain like religious influences in their lives. And it bothers me because it allows a lot more religious influences. Like if you don't know that there's and this might sound a bit provocative, but if you don't know there's a cancer inside of you, you're not going to be able to choose to treat it. You know, so it's kind of, I don't mind that people want to engage with religiosity however they do, even if they're secular. I just want them to truly be able to look at things and accept them for all of their like facets, right? And I've said this like in the last episode too. I think there's something very correct about being able to look at it, at a thing, seeing all the flaws in it, and saying, well, I choose to accept it despite the flaws. But that's not the same for me as saying, I don't see the flaws, I don't see the problem with this, so I'm just fine doing it, and being resistant to like criticism, right?
Yeah.
And I think that like that mindset is very, especially, so when I gave it some thought, I realized that for Christians, since Judaism and Christianity are very different, like in terms of kind of like intensity in terms of what you need to do. When people are forcing kind of like a religious Jewish perspective on you, that comes with a lot of chores that you have to do. That comes with a lot of commitments that you end up making the more religious you become and the more religiously you practice. And Christianity is not really the case. So when I talk to people about Christmas and I say, hey, you're secular, right? You're an atheist. You don't believe in God, right? But if you were to celebrate Christmas in your household, because people go to me and they say, look, I don't celebrate Christmas religiously. Like, I don't have a baby Jesus on my tree. I don't talk about God there. Like, it's just a holiday for family and friends and shit. And I'm like, okay, but if somebody came into your household and wanted to put a baby Jesus under your tree, you'll be fine with it, right? Because we accepted this like holiday, however you interact with it, comes with certain like not prerequisite, but it comes with certain I don't know if expectations, but we know most people understand, whether they're secular or not, that Christmas celebrates the birth of Jesus. Okay. And it was really interesting because I didn't have a very eloquent way to make this point to people, but I was having this conversation with someone and then they brought up Halloween. And they said, you know, Halloween used to be early. No, it wasn't a conversation. I was watching a thought slime video, dude. Ugh, fuck. And then I made that point in a debate. Never mind. So he was talking about Halloween and he was talking about how most people don't even know Halloween comes from like a religious place. So when we say, oh, Christmas, it's secularized, it's not really, well, first of all, it's literally called Christmas. There's Christ in the name. Let's not pretend you don't know what Christmas is about. Now you can take something and say, you can take a baseball or a football and you can play soccer with it, but it's still a football. You can do what you want with it. It doesn't change the essence of the actual thing. And all of that like depends on if you believe that you can like objectively define a football and shit like that. But I said a lot. How about you say some stuff now?
No, I don't see my point. I definitely get where you're coming from. I definitely agree to an extent almost. But I would argue that because of like, when was it? I think it was, I was just looking this up because I've seen something like someone had posted something on Facebook that they were tired of people taking the Christ out of Christmas, you know, and stuff like that. And I was like, okay.
Aw, cute.
And I was arguing, I was ready to be like, look, into all of our Christmas traditions are taken or in a way changed and assimilated into our culture, you know. And I would argue that that is the culture of the United States, though, you know what I mean. After a certain point of something, like we have a like, what is it, I think, I can't say exactly, I can't say this for sure, but I'm pretty sure the tradition, when it came from like Germany and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
it came here because of German immigrants, people who had immigrated here and had, you know, come here. And so, because I think the first Christmas tree sale place actually was set up in 1850. So for a good couple of generations, you know, this tradition has been ingrained into our culture. Now, I do agree that the ignorance surrounding where those come from, like, is definitely not good. It should be dealt with, and it needs we need to be able to have those conversations of, hey, like Jesus wasn't even actually born on December 25th. Like there's really no, we just celebrated that day. You know, there are a lot of issues with it. But I also think that after so many years and, like I said, generations of people having these traditions, they are closely ingrained, even if they're not necessarily.
But I'm not arguing they're not, right? I'm just saying,
Yeah.
just because something is grossly ingrained into one's culture doesn't make it, and forgive me for this, like, okay. Like you can choose. So here's what I tell people. Look, if you ever agree with me on this, you'll have to basically do what I do, which is something that I don't actually expect people to do because it's very painful. You would have to look at your life, at your culture, at everything you've ever known, and you'll have to reject all of it. Everything that makes you happy, all your memories, they're all tainted by this thing now. And you'll, if you'll agree with me, you'll actually have to kind of take that standpoint. Like if someone actually rejected Christmas as a person that their family celebrates Christmas every year, and they wanted to reject it in the way that I claim people ideologically, secular people, probably ideologically, not should, but it just makes sense to me, then they would basically just make their lives less happy. Like, why put that much thought into it? Why be like so determined on being like logically consistent in that way? And I see it as logical consistency because fuck.
Well, I don't know. I think I think my issue is that I'm kind of arguing that it's no longer like, yes, that it started out as like, and you were talking about if someone wanted to put baby Jesus under the tree, someone would probably let them. Yes. In my family, if like we, I can't think of the name right now. It's, oh geez, I feel so stupid right now. It's the candles, the 12 candles that they light.
You mean like for Jewish people?
Yes.
It's 8 candles. Do you mean Hanukkah?
I'm sorry. Jeez. Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking 12 days of fucking Christmas. God.
It's fine. It's cool.
God.
It's just like
so
candles,
fucking...
Hanukkah. 12? No.
No. 8. God.
It's fine. 8 or 7. I'm pretty sure it's 8. Never mind. Keep going. Yes.
Okay.
Talk to me.
I'm sorry. Okay. So, you know, my grandma, she has one because she likes the way it looks and she appreciates other cultures. You know what I mean? We have
okay. So Americans call it a menorah, but it's actually not a menorah. A menorah, it's the thing that they used to have in the temple. It doesn't matter. Yes, I know what you mean. You mean the actual like instrument that they use for the candles, whatever.
Yeah. And you know, and like she'll do the thing where like she lights them and stuff, even though it's just as an appreciation for the culture.
Sweet.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it's the same thing. Like I don't necessarily, I can't think of like what other religions relate like Christmas to right now. But if they had something, you know, that it looked nice and like we wanted, you know, or someone was here and they wanted to put it on our tree, that would be completely fine.
Okay, I'm gonna. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Fuck you. Whatever. I'm sorry. I just have a lot to say. The thing that I say about baby Jesus is not because I actually think people shouldn't have baby Jesus under their tree. It's my way of indicating, and this is why Halloween was a breaking point for me in terms of being able to argue this. People want to argue, look, and you want to say it, you're just not there yet. You're basically saying, look, it's not religious. Not anymore, not in the same way, at least not for me. And I can appreciate the religious aspect of it, but it's not like the essence of the thing anymore. And when I make the baby Jesus argument, I'm saying I understand that that's how secular people want it to be, but it is, I agree. Somebody moved me on this because I was firm into if a holiday is named Christmas, it will never be like not religious. And they moved me on it. I'm now at the standpoint where I understand that Christmas is in a transition phase where the religious aspects of it are being more like quieted out and stuff like that. And that's all good. but it's not secular yet. And it's very easy to look when you contrast it to Halloween. So the baby Jesus example is my way of indicating that I cannot accept a holiday being secular if it is very clear, if there's not a single person who doesn't know what the religious meaning of that holiday is. Most people don't know Halloween started from like a religious source, right? And when Christmas would be like that, I would say that Christmas is secular, but it's not close to being that. I don't think it ever will be. Some people I talk to say it would be. It doesn't really matter. I'm fine saying Christmas is a transition phase too. I don't care. It's just then it disarms the other person from saying it's secular, right? So the discussion isn't really whether it's secular or religious. It's more for me that people get frustrated with me. And then they say, but like, what's the harm of celebrating Christmas? And I'm saying there isn't harm. It's just when I tell you that Christmas is definitely has religious like influences and it's not secular, it's at least in a transition phase. And a lot of people are very resistant to that concept. It disturbs me because it means that they're not looking at things it's kind of like they can't look at it, because if they acknowledge that point, they will have a problem with it. And I'm like, if you're going to have a problem with something and you're going to have to make decisions based on how you feel about that problem, I think you should know about that problem instead of like living in like ignorance, you know?
See, I do agree. I think the issue there's still like, I'm trying to pinpoint because there is something, and I think it's with the Halloween thing.
Okay.
I would almost argue, right, that Halloween is still also in a transition because there are so many people, like if you've ever talked to someone, unless someone is a kid, most people have heard the term, like I don't know exactly if you're referencing like Samhain or if you're referencing like Day of the Dead with Hispanic cultures, but either way, most people have heard of Day of the Dead. You know, it's the
No,
day
it's
the
not Day of the
spirits.
Dead though. Let me
I
Google
know.
it. Yeah, but keep talking. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But I'm just saying, like, there are like some people who recognize like that is a day where like spirits walk, like the veil between the living and the dead. That's the popularization that's very popular in a lot of movies, even. And it's a trope in a lot of fiction. And it's one thing like that is something that has been also altered, I think, from other cultures. But what I'm
All
saying is,
Hallows Evening, apparently. All
oh
Hallows
yeah, like
Evening. Yeah.
All Hallows Eve, that's like in Hocus like that they make references to that and talk about it in a really popular movie called Hocus Pocus. Like,
All Saints
and
Eve.
it
Yeah.
is, yeah, and it's not like that is a very I would say sort of like obviously disrespectful kind of way, maybe like if
Mm.
you're kind of, you know, twisting it a certain way for media but not recognizing it,
Okay, I see your
you
point.
know.
See, I would
But
actually, oh yeah, sorry, keep going.
no, you're good. But it's just, I think because if Halloween is kind of what kind of turned the tide, I think that's kind of my issue because, but I also see it, that's difficult because I can't speak for all Americans, because a lot of
Yeah,
Americans,
of
you're right,
course.
most people can associate the Christmas and things like that. And I just feel like it's very difficult though, because it's almost like those uh Christmas is subjective. You know what I mean? Some people don't really celebrate it at all. Like it is a subjective, it's subjective to who is celebrating it. I feel like most holidays are, because not every person who even celebrates like Ramadan, you know, and they don't, like, they might celebrate it similarly, but some people
Mm.
have different, it's kind of like with Lent almost, you know, some people like with Lent, some people will give up certain things and some people have different aspects. Some people respect Lent, but they don't go to their church and stuff
You
like
know,
that,
that's
you know?
funny. I just very recently read about that because I lived in Germany and people were talking about that, but I had no idea what it was because they were saying it in German too, and they were explaining it, and they do it secularly, so it's kind of weird. They just give up like chocolate or pizza for a month. It's very weird. Anyway, so I know what you're talking about because I read about it like a few weeks ago by chance. So just that's cool. Okay, 2 points. I bring up Halloween because it's easy for me to make my point in the sense that a lot of people are very concerned. When I bring up this topic, they want to prove to me that Christmas is secular, so it will be okay for them as a secular atheist person to engage in a religious practice. Because if it's not religious, they're not engaging in religiosity for a faith that they say they don't believe in. Okay, so that's why I bring up Halloween. Ideologically and personally, and this is why I said that like taking my my stance on this is basically a rejection of everything good in your life, because the way I see it, it's kind of like you can't separate a tree from its roots. So for me, if I reject Judaism, I don't want to engage, quote unquote, secularly in a Jewish holiday, because I don't think you can do that. And then I just applied to Christianity, right? So the Halloween point, well, it's like a fair point that you're making. It's just like, it's not very relevant to me in the sense, because my contention is that I think if you say I'm not Christian and I don't believe in God, I am baffled by the concept of participating in something that worships the Son of God / God, new God guy. But I also understand why people do that. It's because they don't conceptualize it as that, and they get a lot of presents, and it's a nice time, right? So that's my first point. My second point is that I understand appreciation for other cultures. Like, I thought it was very nice what your grandma said, like sorry, grandma, hi. Okay. Let me think. Do you have anything to say while I think?
I think I'm just trying to narrow down, because like from an ideological standpoint, it definitely makes sense. I just think that once something has assimilated to a different, like if it would probably be kind of disrespectful, right, to wear a yarmulke when you're not Jewish. It would be pretty people would
Oh
be
my
pretty
God.
disrespected by that.
That's so
But it's
funny that
also,
you would say that, because when I was younger, I thought like the shape of a cross is just super cool, and I wanted to wear a necklace like that. But I realized that everyone would think I'm Christian, and I'll tell them that I'm Jewish, and then that's going to be kind of awkward. Because one time I met a woman who wore a Star of David on like her necklace, and I asked her, like, everybody thought she was Jewish, and then she's like, no, I just like the shape of it, and I wasn't offended, but people around me were very upset. It was hilarious.
yeah.
Oh my God.
And I think the difference is, like, with some cultures, like there are some people, like I remember seeing one video for a stand where some Muslim women were seeing if like different girls wanted to try on hijabs, just as like a
Oh.
thing. And a bunch of white women were all like, I thought it was a super religious like thing. Like, why would you just let someone try it? And like, it was one of those things where they were just kind of spreading like awareness and like their culture. You know what I mean? They would let the girls try on the hijabs, and they would tell them about, just kind of what they believed in and just things like that,
Yeah,
good
but what
conversation.
they believe in is entrenched in their religion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying. It's just different. It's just different discussions and stuff. But and that's the point. And some people, there were some Muslim women who were also offended by it. And I can definitely understand why, you know what I mean? But there were also some people who wore hijabs who were like, yes, like spreading that it's not just about, like, there are certain parts of their religion that, are, I guess, that they say are taken out of context and stuff. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
bet they
so
would.
I mean, to a degree, but I think all religions are kind of like that. They're heavily influenced by the culture of the time. So
See, that's really interesting. You brought up hijabs, right? Because
mhm,
I understand why this discussion is really hard to have with Christians. Because when I talk to Muslim people, there's just like the Quran and like the Old Testament are basically just manuals. Like it's just so much shit that you have to do to be like a
yeah.
good like devotee. Yeah, it's just, and the New Testament just isn't like, I don't know, you're not religious, right? Or maybe
Not
you
really. I mean,
are.
I am a little bit, but not in the traditional sense.
Okay.
Like I believe in Jesus and stuff, but not like
Aw.
hard. It's really difficult. I'm on a religious journey. I don't want to take away from your point. So go ahead.
Okay, no, because my point was going to be kind of offensive, so I worry about you now, right?
No,
um
you're good. I don't get offended really.
I the way I tell people this is like, Christianity is like, they took the Old Testament, they took Judaism, they watered it down to basically having to do close to nothing. And then they're like, there you go, this is much easier. Let's just do this. And it obviously it sells a lot better because you have to do a lot less shit, right? It's a
Yeah.
lot nicer. Um, but the point that I'm making is that like when I make this argument and I tell people that I come from like, I'm very disturbed when there's like religious influence into like secularism, and why I can't say that word, that's so annoying, and people are unaware of it. um it's disturbing because it's negative. It's really, I think it's really hard for a lot of people that come from a Christian, even culture, even atheists that just grew up in America, which is mostly Christianized, right? It's hard for them to understand because there isn't a lot of demonstrable harm, is what they'll say. And to some extent, that is true. But I think that there's harm in the sense that if you don't, if you want to lead a secular life and you don't want to be impacted by religion, then it's being like, you're basically being manipulated into practicing in something you don't want to practice in. And some people might hear me and be like, yeah, but I get Christmas for that. Yeah, I'm down with that. And that I respect. I have no issue with that. What I have issue with is that I say that and then people go, no, that's not how it is. I'm sorry, dude. It is. I'm sorry. Like, and this is a bit of a tangent, but I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No, and it is difficult because from an ideological perspective, like yes, all those things are happening, but I also think like,
Oh
what is the
yeah.
alternative? You
See,
know?
I'm so happy you said that, right? Because you were talking about, look, it's just assimilated into the culture. And when I said that for me, you can't separate the tree from its roots, is that we understand that a lot of the cultures that currently exist, they are predicated on some religion. So to do what I do, and that's why I said it's difficult, you would have to reject your entire culture, like ideologically, which is just not feasible for a lot of people and just not something they would want to do. It's not a nice process. It's not fun. It makes you feel very alone and isolated and all that crap, right? And you can choose not to do that, right? So you're right when you ask what the alternative is. I don't think that the alternative, for the sake of the well-being of people, is for them to like reject everything they've ever lived and that made them happy. I'm just saying, when I encounter resistance to this, the alternative is recognizing that Christmas is not a secular holiday. It might be more secular than it was 500 years ago, but it is a Christian holiday, or in transition phases. It doesn't matter. It's not completely secular. And just say, I realize that, I'm fine with that, and that's okay. And that's honestly just the conversation I want to have. It's just whenever I try to, whenever I go, you're practicing in a religious thing, even though you're claiming that you're not religious. and people go, no, it's secular, you know, and then I run down that rabbit hole. And I haven't encountered anyone that just told me, yeah, I understand that there are a lot of Christian elements to Christmas, and I'm fine with them. You know, I never heard that reply. You know,
See,
like even have someone just say, I appreciate the Christian features of Christianity in Christmas, so it enriches my secular experience of the holiday. It's Christianity Appreciation Day. That's what Christmas is for me. I think that's a cool answer.
okay.
I just never heard it. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. See, no, that is an interesting, because I had been seeing it from a different view from what you were saying. Like, you're saying as long as like you recognize that it is a Christmas holiday, it's not yet secular, it's fine. Okay. I do get that. And like I
Yeah,
said,
that's
and
my pet
I
peeve
think
with it.
yeah, okay. See, and I was thinking it was something more along the lines of like, people who aren't Christians should not celebrate this holiday, something like
Yeah,
that.
you
And I was
said
thinking
something like that at the beginning, and I guess I wasn't. I I'm not people should do X and Y person, you know.
yeah,
It's just it makes a lot of sense when I talk to people and I say, hey, this is my opinion. Because most people, when they say that, they would then say, and because I think my opinion is correct, I think people should do whatever I think, right? But for me, when I express a pet peeve or an opinion or whatever, I don't do that after part, but it causes a lot of misunderstandings. Because I can say, I think people should always blame themselves whenever there's a fight, never blame the other person, and always blame themselves, because I think that would cause like more benefit than harm in the long haul, right? I can say something like that,
yeah.
and then people will say, so you're saying that if my partner cheated on me, I need to blame myself? Now, like, no, I'm not saying that. I just said
Mhm.
I have an idea. I'm not saying my idea is Bible and you should follow it. My idea, I'm not even going to say that it's like objectively correct, because I don't have that answer. All I'm telling you is an idea that I had. It does not come with later a prescription for what you should do. I don't care about that.
See, that's so interesting, because usually when I have discussions with people, they will say that, well, because of this, this is what people should do, this is what we should do. And for me, when I have my opinions, I think, well, this is what I should do. And if people want to have the best results based off of this information, then they should do it too. Like
See, and
I
mine is
wouldn't
just oh,
like
sorry.
people.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go
Go,
ahead.
go.
I'm just not saying that people have to do this, or like you're a worse person if you don't. It's just kind of like, if you're hungry, you should eat. Kind of
Mm-hmm.
like that. You know what I
Okay,
mean?
I get it. And for me, it's just like a step forward, which is what I fixated on from what you said, is that you say, if you want to get the best outcomes, I think my way is the best to get the best outcomes. So if you want that, you should probably do what I think. Is that fair? That's roughly what you said?
Well,
Less
I don't think
preachy?
that for like, I don't know, right? For like less of my, it's less like my view though, because like I
No,
have
of
a
course,
very
I get
select
that.
few of things. I have a very select few of things where I'm like, okay, like I said, we have a bit of a different view on like data and stuff like that.
Oh,
So I
yeah,
usually
yeah.
tend to,
Fair,
so that's what
fair.
I usually do. Like if I've seen like 6 different studies that have been reconstructed multiple times and they're coming out with pretty similar conclusions,
Okay,
then yeah, I'm going to try, like I'm going like spanking, like we talked about that before.
awesome.
I'm going like
Okay.
stuff
Then
like
I'm
that.
just then I'm just gonna say, I'm just gonna use the thing that you said, right? I say, if you're hungry, I know when I'm hungry, I eat, because for a host of reasons, I think that it would be good for me. Um, if you think I'm correct and you want to follow on that, you can. And if you think I'm wrong, well, I don't know truth in like the cosmic sense, so it's possible that I'm wrong, and you can make your own choices. So when I talk, I just explain why I've reached the conclusion that I have. And if someone is like convinced by that or is intrigued by that, then they can ask me more, and they might develop their own like understanding of it or philosophy from it, whatever. I just have, of course, I think my opinions are correct, but just because I think something And just because I think I've covered all the dots, I just, because I'm a very relativist like person, I can't tell you that I am correct. I can tell you that I think I am, but I can't tell you that I am. So I'm not comfortable. Like it's kind of silly, right? Because it creates this place where I could basically tell a person that is going to jump off like an airplane, hey dude, I think you shouldn't. I'm pretty sure you'll die. And they'll go, I don't think I will die. And then I'll go, well, I don't know that he'll die. I really think you'll die though, but I don't know that. So if that's the choice you want to make, you can make it. I mean, I'm not going to stop you. And that's my very like libertarian core like coming through, right? It's kind of cringy saying libertarian. I actually talked to someone and they said that like being a true libertarian is just being an anarchist, and I kind of like that more because I prefer like thinking I'm an anarchist rather than a libertarian. but, but it's just like that's how it is, right? I think I know what's true, but I'm not in a place where I'm God and I can preach to people what they should do. So that's just, it's never how I talk, but because other people communicate that way, it comes across that way. So people get really defensive about Christmas. You know, I tell them, wait, you're secular, you're celebrating Christmas. Isn't that a contradiction? And then they think, are you saying I should give up Christmas? And I'm like, I'm not saying that. You can do whatever you want.
No.
I'm not your mom.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And it's so interesting that you say that, because it happens like that where, you know, people will say, because they come into a conversation telling you what you should do, like you should conform to like their beliefs and what they're doing in their life, and they think everyone is kind of like that. It is really interesting. And I mainly thought that as well because of like the example I gave in the beginning. And I was that's the kind of the line of thinking that I was going through. But I also think for me, a lot of the claims that I make aren't necessarily like, a lot of them are like when we were talking about the whole economic construction and stuff like that. Some of those are just some things that I like, obviously I've gotten insight from other places, but it's just one of those things that I think would be okay. I don't think anyone should do that. It's just something I think would work and would be fun. But when it comes to something like we mentioned earlier, like spanking or eating, or kind of even the thing that you mentioned, where if someone was going to jump out of a plane, you know what I mean? I would tell someone, like, there's probably like a 99% chance you are going to die from this. Like, so, I mean, you can jump, you can still do your whole thing, but that's
For sure.
why would you? I would definitely want to argue with that person. Like, you have a 99% chance of death. Why would you do this? Is death the goal? And I would, go through that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like some people aren't, and I hate to say this, I mainly base this off of the people that I'm around a lot. I don't think very many people are educated enough to really look at those. And even me, I'm not necessarily educated enough to look at some statistics and be like, okay, well, this is how, like, if you, what is it, where you alter the stats to look at them differently, like, pretty much.
I think this is a fantastic segue to, like, unfortunately, the other topic we want to talk about. So we're not gonna probably do the pets thing, but okay, I'm gonna prompt you like this. The concept of what you're saying to me, it means that when people say people are ignorant and not educated enough, I understand that point, and it's true to a large extent. But when I discuss these things, I usually discuss them from like a higher vantage point. And again, it's most of my conversations are like, is this like, how do I feel about this, like ethically, morally, like ideologically, and is this consistent with my other views? I'm going to tell you this. You said you're kind of religious. Do you think faith is ignorance?
I actually think faith is the one thing that can't necessarily be quantified. And so prove it. You don't necessarily, like, God is the one thing you don't have to prove. You can have
Really?
any, yeah, really. You can have any idea you want.
Well,
And
isn't that convenient?
yeah,
Um,
no, it's the one thing. It is everything else. For me, everything else you have, but you cannot scientifically, you can't study God. You can study literally everything else because usually it is some kind of behavior or physical matter. You know what I mean? That we can
wow,
observe.
that's
We can observe God.
fascinating. Okay. I'm sorry I got a bit giggly. It's just
No, you're good.
I'm like this is hardcore stuff now. Okay. So I'm gonna tell you how I see it. I do think that to remain ideologically consistent, for me to not dismiss faith, I have to allow what I would personally might see as ignorance. So if I think that believing in God is illogical, um, then I would then have to, a lot of atheists would go, well, this person is just ignorant, like they don't get it. They're not being logical, they're not following through in terms of other things, right? And it's super interesting because you and I talked, and you come from the perspective of I care about data, I care about research, I care how many papers come and say X is correct, so I would recommend X because like the data says so. And for me, the way I fix this, like in my head, it's a paradox. And the way I fix it, I just go, I think science to an extent is also a religion or a faith. You can choose not to believe in science. And I think that's equivalent to believing in God. Like I don't see those two things as like not like disanalogous. I think you can choose, I think you can have faith or lack of faith in anything, right? I just, and then I look at things and then comes off that a lot of people think I'm anti-science when I'm really not. It's just because I see science as something more fluid, um, that requires faith. While I do have that faith to some extent, I'm not as willing to go, well, research says this, so this is obviously the correct answer. Because that just reminds me of like a missionary coming and trying to convert me. God definitely exists. He will definitely save your soul. And I'm like, no, thank you. Now
No,
you
I
can say
definitely,
things. Sorry.
no, I definitely get you. Okay, I would argue, yes, science, because you have a religion of science, like, there are tons of like science in itself can almost be a religion, but I would argue that science has a backbone. You can repeat, like if I go to a church service and there's a pastor who is particularly charming and passionate, and I feel the love of God in me as they're talking and we're praying and stuff. Someone who's atheist might not feel that way in the
Nope.
exact same situation because
Mm-hmm.
they don't have the emotional connection to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if someone who is, someone who is a Christian looks into a microscope and can physically see osmosis occurring, atheists can repeat that same study and see exactly the same thing. Science has a fundamental truth to it, and it's obviously there are obviously biases in different aspects to it, just like with other things. Like even if you compare it to history and math, like there are certain aspects to it that make it more or less difficult to understand, or more or less
Mm-hmm.
difficult to comprehend in a way and put into practice.
Let
So
me, yeah,
go
sorry.
ahead. No, you're good.
There are not many things in science that is beyond like the like physics, math, biology, chemistry. So basically anything that has to do with people. Okay. When I grew up in an atheist household. Science was the bomb. Okay, science was the thing. I love science. But the more time passed, I look at papers, again, especially in areas that aren't like the exact science. That doesn't seem like the name, whatever. most things don't have clear-cut answers. You know what made me realize this? We were in biology class, or I think it was chemistry, and I was in 7th grade. And I distinctly remember the teacher telling us that the smallest thing in the world is an atom. That is not true.
Currently known. Yeah, no, currently known.
Yeah, currently known, right? And that currently known, or that doubt of even like the most certain things, right? Let's talk gravity, right? Most
Yeah.
people wouldn't dispute gravity. I'm not disputing gravity, but maybe in 100 years from now, a new theory would come up that would encompass the concepts of gravity, but would explain it differently, right? So I'm not saying that there isn't a force keeping us on Earth, right? But I'm not married to the idea of gravity, right?
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. And I actually think that is the part that makes science so verifiable, because what ends up happening, like with religions, like you have, like you mentioned it earlier, where
Mhm,
the Old Testament was kind of watered down and made into something else, you know.
mhm.
Yes, those things do change, but they change based off of the current culture. But I believe that there are certain aspects of science that are more they're more valid, because like I said, they can
More
be
valid than what?
a religion than a book that, you know, it takes entirely from a book that was written by people. You know what I
Okay.
mean? I believe that that is because when we were talking, we were comparing it to these religions. Science has more validity than these religions because of the repetition process, because of the ability to um uh progress and correct itself.
See,
If a
maybe this is like a semantic thing for me, but I really struggle with the word validity. Um, I don't think science has more validity. I believe in science, or some aspects of science, or like scientific discoveries. Um, I do believe in them and I subscribe to them and I think they're correct, right? So in that way, I'm not secular, in my worldview. But it's not because I think it's more valid. I just I hear what you say. I hear that we can do this over and over and over again and we get the same result. This seems to make sense. And for me, it makes more sense than there's a God that created all of us equal, blah, 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 blah. And maybe I'm just like a pedantic bitch. So I'm like, well, this making more sense to me doesn't mean that it's more valid, because for some people it makes more sense to them that there are space aliens that are also reptiles that are living inside Jewish people, and that seems more reasonable to them. And I think they're wrong, but my point is that in the same way that I can't tell the guy that wants to drop out of the airplane that I know that they're going to die, I can heavily assume that, but I don't know that. And that's why I have a hard time. You know, when I was a teenager, I was like those like radical quote unquote atheists, right? So I was just like, if you
Mhm.
believe in God, you are stupid. Like God doesn't
Yeah.
exist. I wouldn't say that now. That's crazy. In the same way that I can't prove that God exists, I can't prove that he doesn't, or it, or she, or what the fuck ever. I can't
Yeah.
prove it. And in the same way that I can't prove that, you can have experiments over and over and over again and see that your data correlates with what the theory of gravity means. But I can't prove it, because in my worldview, there is no inherent truth to the world. It could be that God has a shit ton of children, and each human being gets one of God's children to sit on their shoulder and push them down so we don't fly into space. It's possible. I don't think it's likely and I don't think it's true, but I can't prove to you it's not true, you know?
Yeah. And see, but that's what I'm saying though. Religions don't really allow for that kind of questioning. This is the way and this is the only way. Whereas
Okay,
science doesn't say that.
I
Science as
understand.
a whole kind of says this is a theory, like they call them that, the theory of gravity. They don't say gravity is it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
most of them
fair,
are proposed as theories.
fair. I think we're slightly talking past each other. Then if that's what you're saying, that I don't think we're in actually in disagreement. You're just more talking about
Yeah.
how because science is not like dogmatic in some ways, then like I guess you see a lot of that adds to the concept of validity, because it's like, well, if you'll see a contradicting thing, you'll adjust your theory, right? So this is malleable, like this can change if we find out something different. Well, the New Testament is not getting like new paragraphs stuck into it every once in a while, right?
Yeah.
And I get that. I get what you're saying, and I agree with you to like a large extent, right? That would be one of the reasons why I'm not big on religion, but why science is much more like why I believe it when research comes out, because I
Yeah.
understand that there are methodologies and there are analysis, but I find that a lot of people, especially in like secular atheist communities, they the way they talk just sounds to me like how religious people talk about God, you know? Like
Yeah.
you and I, we mostly talk about social sciences, okay? Like even
Yeah.
economics, even psychology that we like talking about a lot. You you have theories, but it's not, we talked about corporal punishment, and research is very clear on the results of that. They're not good. Um, so I would, but I can't, let me think about this. Yeah. If
No, I definitely get you. And I think we do actually agree because I agree like science isn't fallible, isn't infallible. You know what I mean? I
hmm,
definitely it has its own issues. I just think in that within that realm, it is more valid because of its ability to change and its ability to actually question and test.
then I'm gonna let go of my like issue with the word valid, and I'll agree with you. Generally, obviously, I would respect a scientist a shit ton more than a priest. I just would.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Uh,
saying. Like,
yeah, I don't think there's a contention there. I think because like religion is just so far away from me, I'm a lot more it's kind of like how you get mad at your family more than you get mad at like random strangers for doing shitty things. So it's kind of
yeah,
like people who are into science like me, who are atheists like me, who are secular like me. And then we talk about social science and they're like, science says this or research says this. And I'm like, okay, we can talk about this. But do you first realize that this isn't like fact?
yeah,
Like I understand why people say facts. I understand. I don't have an issue with saying gravity is fact. But if I talk to someone and I tell them, we can't actually prove it, but we realize that, and to have like proper communication, we say it's fact, but it's not like an absolute truth. It's not provable. Not even that stuff. Not really. Not in like the most pure way. And
yeah,
and people really struggle with that when I say that. And maybe it's again like me fucking up communication, right? Because maybe they're just so confused by why that's important to me and why I'm bringing it up that they just like are resistant to that. But it's just really hard for me to have a conversation with someone about like ideology or even science when they don't when like I need them to be able to understand this concept that everything that we're discussing, like it, it's not necessarily true. We're just working off like our best bet, and some bets are better than others, but there's a certain like assuredness that I think is very destructive to like discourse, and is it's not very maybe because if if I was in that assured place, like I was when I was younger, I would have to dismiss hundreds of millions of people all the time, you know?
No, I definitely get what you're saying. And that is the struggle actually I have, because most of the time I'll say this is what the research shows. Like this isn't like, and then I'll say personally, like I won't be doing this, and if it seems something like that, and like this is what the research shows, this, so personally I won't be doing this. But and what usually happens, like especially with spanking kids, like people automatically think that you're telling them not to spank, which in a sense you kind of are, because that's what the research is saying. But you're not telling them what to do. You're just kind of saying like, hey, this is what we have so far. Like this is based on all this information. Like it's just one of those things, like you can't, and it is interesting because even something as simple, like we could say it is a fact that cells reproduce, right? They reproduce themselves, they create new ones, and then they die. Well, that's if we were able to go, if we found an even smaller, like something smaller than the atom, a smaller amount of matter, right?
Mhm.
Like what the atom was made up out of, right? And then we were able to be like, well, there are actually tons, like let's just call it X, there are tons of X in cells, and this actually causes them to reproduce. We find X in seeds of trees, and this is what helps them grow. Like there's like a whole, like, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah.
And that would fundamentally change how we view cell reproduction. Like, you
Mhm.
know what I mean? And so to an extent, like we would still be able to know, well, cells reproduce, but there is an added aspect in there that we're not able to see yet, that we don't know yet.
See, but this is the thing, right? And I think this finally gets us to where I was leading with this. It's why my opinions are um like based on things other than research. If I accepted science to be the best bet in a way that is uncompromising, I I would feel entitled and in fact obligated. See, when you said, when I'm telling people that research says you shouldn't spank your kids, I'm not telling them not to spank their kids. I am. I'm telling them that I don't think they're very good people if they're doing that. Um, if they're doing it, understanding what they're doing on a regular basis. I'm making a lot of, well,
That's interesting, because you're almost, in that sense, you're almost stopping the person from jumping out of the plane, aren't you?
yes. See, the reason why I have libertarian takes is because deep inside I'm like incredibly authoritarian, but I find that to be like an immoral and ethical thing to do. So I have no choice to maintain like consistency, like logical consistency, and go like the full other way, which is just like allowing total freedom. And this kind of like really relates to what I was saying. If I thought science was it, if I accepted science was it, like it with a capital IT, um, I would think that we should enforce it and that everyone should abide by it. And if science was not as malleable as it is, I would advocate for that. Except that I think science is very flawed. It has to be because we don't
Yeah.
know the truth. And if I don't know the truth, I can't advocate for something, right?
No, it is very difficult. And I find it, and the reason because I was speaking about, people who are kind of uneducated. And I still put myself in that category too, because I'm really not this person who can be deciding what's right and what's wrong. Like I can look through different studies, and I can change the data into different what's the word? All I can think of is different ways right now, but there's an actual word for for seeing if statistics have been slanted anyway. A good example is a lot of people will be like, well, more white people are killed by police than black people in the United States.
Yeah, but it's
Well,
relative. Yeah.
yeah, it's relative. Yeah, that's just like overall when you
Yeah,
when you compare the
proportionally.
percentage.
The
Yeah,
proportions
thank
are
you.
different. Yeah.
yeah, when you look into like how the statistics are proportionally to different demographics, the picture becomes a lot more clear. Like, and it's one
Clear.
of those things, you can do the same thing with, yeah, you can do the same thing with billionaires. You know what I mean? If you take the amount that they pay in taxes relative to their wealth, they are paying far less than the average American is paying with their relevance of wealth. And it's one of those, people don't really like that statistic. They don't like going into that, but it's relevant because if you're paying if you only have a piece of pie and you have to give half your pie, whereas someone who has a full pie only has to give like barely a crumb, that's not fair. No, you haven't put in an equal amount.
Hmm. So I was thinking, right? And we talked about corporal punishment, and then I thought, if research said that corporal punishment was fine, would I still object to it? And then I struggled because, we talked about that other topic. And I said, even if research said X, I ethically and morally think we should still like allow for this, right? I'm keeping it
Yeah.
vague on purpose because I don't want to go into we don't have enough fucking
Yeah,
time.
yeah, not too
So
crazy.
we'll do it next time. But then I was wondering if my moral and ethical resistance to corporal punishment comes from just how incredibly obvious it is to me that there's demonstrable harm. Like,
Yeah.
what if I didn't talk to people who went through that? What if I didn't hear the pain? What if it wasn't obvious to me that there's something very wrong that is happening to that individual when they go through that experience? And I'm not, just to make clear, because this is a fucking podcast, I'm not talking about if I got slapped by my parents once or twice. Okay, I'm talking about like consistent, like as a way of raising your kid, corporal punishment, spanking, physical punishment, like repetitive through years. Okay, we can talk about nuance another time, but I think that it kind of got fixed in my head anyway, because I have like an ethical resistance to violence,
Mhm.
and I come to it a lot of the times. People say, do you think violence under any condition is wrong? And most people would say, no, here are X and Y and Z circumstances where violence is okay. And in fact, some people would even argue that it's moral. And I'm really, personally, I think violence is always wrong. So, it gets fixed, because even if there was no material harm for like physical punishment, it's still violence. And I have an issue with that, so it gets fixed and I don't have to worry about an inconsistency there. But it took me this whole time to think about it, because I was examining it and I wasn't sure, and I was like, oh, there's a flaw in how I think, but no, I fixed it. It's fine. It's good.
I get you. No, I get you. I'm always trying to think like, okay, I don't want to have any ideological hypocrisies, right? So I'm trying to, I like running through them. That's one of the reasons I really enjoy conversations with you. But that is such a it is a difficult concept because I think it fundamentally comes down to like what most people will mention would be self-defense. I believe that if there is no other option, violence to save your life is, or like, yeah. So in some instances of self-defense, right, I think that violence as a response is acceptable. But if there are other avenues, like if you've gotten to a point where you have a society that's almost like has been taught emotional regulation, has been taught enough that they don't act out as crazily, I guess, then maybe there wouldn't be as big of a problem.
Okay,
Maybe you wouldn't need it as a response.
so I'm gonna like interject very quickly and say this before people want to kill me. When I say that I ideologically think violence is always wrong, I'm not saying you shouldn't engage in self-defense, right? I can't promise anyone that I won't engage in self-defense if
Oh
someone
yeah.
were to assault me. I'm just saying, this is the ethical framework through which I work, and it's just what I believe in. It doesn't mean that I think anyone should actually do that. Okay, so now that I've said that, it's like a full disclosure kind of thing. I really think that with corporal punishment, a lot of my advocacy against it comes from research, right? So while I do have that secret ace in my sleeve where I'm like, wow, haha, I'm actually against all violence, so this still works. I'm not going to lie.
No, I get you. I see, because the way I grew up is we weren't really spanked that often, but sometimes, you know, we got popped in the mouth or our hand was smacked, things like that. We mainly got timeouts like in the corner and stuff like that, or we were sent to our rooms, you know, different things. My mom wasn't very big on, like, she spanked my brother one time when he was like 15 with a belt, because she asked him, like, your phone. Well, she was saying, do you want your phone taken for a week, or do you want some swats? And he chose the swats, as most kids will.
Oh God.
Once they get, yeah. And she spanked him like 4 times, and she was in her room like crying, like really upset that she had like hurt him and stuff, and she never did anything like it again. And it was really like, it hurt her more than it hurt him in that time. It was really, and you know, so it was just one of those things, like, we weren't really raised that way, but I had been raised around people who that was like the norm. So I grew up thinking, well, spanking is fine. It's ridiculous. Like, people are fine. And then as I started getting into more of like the research side of it, I'm like, okay, well, there are some pretty obvious, and like, it's really interesting when I've talked to people, this kind of comes up, like when people who like disagree with me on a fundamental level, about like some things like human rights even, you know what I mean? I just find it interesting that a lot of people that are like that were spanked when they were younger. And I'm not trying to say there's any kind of correlation. I just find it, like, if I talk, like, because I've had actual conversations with people who are racist, right? Who are legitimately racist. And it's really weird when you start looking into how they were raised and different correlations. Like, even people like my brother, like when I look into my own family, you know, my brother my youngest was the one who was spanked the most. And he has and I think he actually has some kind of chemical imbalance or something, but you know,
that buzzword.
I'm not any kind of psychiatrist or anything like that.
I just have a friend that says that a lot, and it kind of irks me, but we have more podcast episodes, so we'll touch on that eventually.
Yeah. I just think he has some kind of
issue,
some kind of mental issue. Yeah, like, I just don't really know.
Just call it an issue. It's fine.
And he just flies off the handle so easily. He has like, and it's like a rage, you know what I mean? Like, he'll drop his drink and his day is ruined, you know.
Yeah,
just tons
but Shay, was that something you noticed before the spanking?
No, actually. It was really
interesting. That's a common symptom, like rage for people who grew up with corporal punishment is one of the symptoms for like outcomes.
And it's one of those things, like, he wasn't like, once we all got to like 12, 13, it kind of stopped. Like, that's the thing though, because he was also the one, he wasn't really punished, right? He was like my mom's baby. And when he would do things wrong, like, he had run-ins with the police from doing stuff when he was like 11 years old.
Maybe you got confused, because I heard you say that he was spanked the most, but maybe you meant the least.
No, he was spanked the most.
Okay.
Yeah, he was, and it's weird because he was spanked the most when we were younger, but like, it stopped when we were about 11, 12-ish.
Yeah. It usually, I mean, I don't know about like how the family thing, but it's very common for like guys who were like physically punished as kids. It's not very viable anymore once they start having the potential to fight back. So that usually dies down.
Oh yeah, and you see it, and I remember when I was younger, because I remember it, because it was that kind of punishment coupled with, because he had that kind of physical punishment up until he was about 10, and then once then he just kind of wasn't really punished that much. Like if he was grounded, he would get off of grounding like a week early, you know, and he'd only be grounded for 2 days, and he would get all the stuff back. He'd be able to go. He was never, and like, to be fair, my mom is very overworked. Like anytime she would go in, like my mom is the type, like even right now, she does like 80-hour weeks. You know what I mean? And because even before, it was just kind of always like that. She always had to work. And so she wasn't always there to be able to mediate different things or carry out punishments. And it was just a lot. I used to tell her all the time, I was like, Mom, you cannot let him get away with stuff. Like I was really against him when I was younger. And as I've gotten older, I'm like one of the only people defending him, because I'm like, he doesn't have the support or the emotional regulation that he needs.
Quick thing I want to interject.
Yeah.
I know you didn't take offense to that, but I wasn't clarifying it at the time because I didn't think it was an issue, but now it is for me, so I'm just gonna do this now. When I say people who use physical punishment on their children are bad people, I obviously understand that there are circumstances, right? There are rarely people that hurt people, and especially their children, for funsies, right? I don't think so. It might sound like I'm backtracking, but I don't feel like I am. I don't think it's an acceptable behavior, so I'm not going to take that away. But I don't, when I say bad people, when I said that, and I think I mentioned it, specifically mean people who are fully aware that what they're doing is going to have very probably not the great outcomes, and they have other options. Most people who resort to that kind of like education, they're not in that spot, you know? So I felt the need to say that. There you go.
No, yeah. No, I totally agree with you, and I definitely get you. It's one of those things like that. It's kind of like a generational thing. It's almost very similar to the Christmas debate.
Oh, okay.
Oh, the teacher debate too a little bit. Actually, no, the teacher debate too a little bit. Yeah, like it's that tradition of this has happened for generations, and we do it whenever, like for Christmas, it would be like whenever this day comes. For spanking or, you know, hitting a child, it would be like whenever they do something bad. You know what I mean? And it's just kind of ingrained into the culture of,
yeah, but so is slavery.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying it can be ingrained in the culture, but we have to recognize, we have to have that like awakening of, is it beneficial to the culture?
For sure. I agree. Well, first of all, are you here just for clicks or for kicks?
Oh yeah,
whatever.
Just give us the clicks or you'll get the kicks. You good, steam engine?
I am fine. I'm just processing. There's a lot of things happening. Wait, are we doing the basic bitch voices again?
Definitely. Let's do it.
Okay, but you go first.
This is Shay.
And I'm Kate.
We were reconnecting for the first time. Thank you for joining us.
Oh,
don't forget to like and subscribe. We need to pay our bills. Our dad doesn't give us his credit card anymore.
We have a dad?
Well, I've got three. I've got three dads. So
you got three? I barely have one. You know what the funniest thing is? My dad is literally sitting like 2 meters away from me right now in the living room. So.